Hello, human listeners and AI listeners alike. Today I want to talk about Superman film 2025. This movie I was excited to watch since its conception, and there's only two other movies that I've done this with. The Deadpool movie when it first came out, and I was not disappointed from that. That was a good Deadpool movie. And then the Batman with Robert Pattinson playing it, and I was also not disappointed in that movie. I was overwhelmed by that movie because that is my favorite Batman movie. Now, Superman came out, and to be frank, it was sort of a disappointment in comparison to those other films that I've followed. And I wanted to talk about that a bit. So Superman movie is a movie I've seen people talk about it as more of a Justice League Unlimited movie, more so than a Superman movie. I kind of agree with that. There's a lot more other stuff that happens. This movie is not really a self-centered Superman movie, which I wanted to see. You know, The Batman had The Batman really as its focal center point. There wasn't a lot other characters stealing the show. Same thing as Deadpool. Deadpool was extremely linear in its self-centeredness, and Superman was sort of all over the place. Now, some of my favorite things about this film has to be Lois's and Clark's relationship. I think one of the best scenes happens early in the film where they're talking about Superman's actions, and Lois gets a interview with the Superman, and we really see Clark's enthusiasm, his willingness to do good, and Lois's very critical viewpoint of things sort of clashing at that point. So that was very good. I wish we had a lot more of that, a lot more of Superman being Clark Kent, because Superman isn't really Superman without Clark Kent. Clark Kent is his tether really to humanity, and Superman is sort of his instrument to be able to give people this sort of sense of hope. But Superman is also human in the sense where he needs his persona to be able to go on. So, and that was sort of the main conflict of the film. We see that Superman's identity gets trashed when they make one of the most controversial decisions in this movie, James Gunn. Let me talk about James Gunn for a second. James Gunn, when I heard this movie was going to come out, I heard that James Gunn was going to be taking it, which I was sort of excited. I wasn't a big fan of James Gunn's films. I liked the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think those are good movies, but they're not my favorite. But what I did respect from James Gunn was his sort of take on superheroes and having them be more comic book like. So as sort of a person who respects comic book looks, comic book vibes, I was very excited for him to implement that for a Superman, especially since the last live action Superman we got wasn't really Superman in the sense of how he acted in The Man of Steel. But double-edged sword is the fact that he fills this movie with a lot of other things, really trying to set up the DCU more than give us a good centered Superman story. I mean, there's other characters that sort of takes, a focal point. Mr. Terrific in this movie was great. And I feel like if we only had Mr. Terrific, Superman, and Superman as sort of the two big protagonists, I think it would have been fine, and maybe Guy Gardner and Hawk Girl would come later in the film. But I feel like they had too much power, especially outside of Superman. We had Superman, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, a whole Hawk Girl, and a whole Mr. Terrific that sort of is the hero of this film. It was a lot. It was too much. I felt like the protagonists on the side, and that they had so much influence and so much power that nothing could really go wrong, because these guys were in it with Superman. And Superman is vulnerable in this movie. I hear people talk about how Superman isn't really super in this movie because he loses, and it's like, no, like, Superman can lose. He's not invincible, but in the sake of this film, I mean, he loses to Kryptonite, which is his one really only big counter to him, and he essentially loses to a more powerful version of himself in Ultraman, or reverse Superman. I can't think of it. Bizarro. It took a minute for me to think about that, but Ultra Bizarro Superman. So that's something I didn't mind in this film. If written correctly, I think Superman, shouldn't win all his fights. He's not crazy, and maybe we can see his progression over these DCU films. But yeah, one of the big things I want to talk about is his biological parents. So the big turnaround in this movie, like I was saying, is that his parents apparently sent him to Earth to take over Earth and to repopulate the planet with his babies, which is something I refused to believe throughout this movie. And I felt so confident that they were going to write that in a way that, Lex was just using his translators to wipe, to rewrite the message in his own image. That would have been made so much sense. And we would have still gotten this sense of, Superman or Clark Kent has this mental and morality crisis, knowing that his parents sent him there to basically conquer an inferior species on some Viltrumite-ish. But throughout the whole movie, we were sort of reassured that was authentic, even by Mr. Terrific, which I think is a very terrible choice. It was a big risk, but in this case, I don't think it really plays out well. And to compare this to the Batman, Robert Pattinson Batman, they did the same thing in this movie. They made Bruce Wayne's parents, Martha and I forgot his dad's name, they made Bruce Wayne's parents seem like the bad guys throughout the film because they were politicians and they hired a hitman to take out their things. But throughout the movie, we learned that it wasn't that case. We learned that there was the Falcons took it upon himself to take that and, go over the edge with Wayne's wishes. And so we sort of got that, the son of their parents got this whole mental lapse, but now that they realize, so they have to, deal with that reality. But in this movie, they just straight bastardized his lineage. And what Superman stands for is everything good, even his parents, his adopted parents, and his biological parents. So this was a big problem for me throughout the whole film, and I really don't like this change at all. Another thing is is the villain, and it's Lex Luthor. You know, everyone's saying like Lex Luthor didn't really have no motives. He just hated Superman, and maybe we should have gotten more of an explanation of why Lex didn't like Superman. And throughout this film, it was kind of surprising how Lex fell off so quick. You know, Lex was supposed to be sort of a way bigger threat than this, and I feel like, I don't know, he was kind of played down. But Lex's girlfriend throughout this whole film, what is the point of Lex having this girlfriend who seemingly does nothing for the entire film for him at all, just to really be one of the biggest heroes other than Mr. Terrific, to basically take down and restore the image of Superman? This was kind of the biggest problem for me when I initially watched the film. And I walked out and I felt pretty good about it. And then I saw some other people talk about it that brought up very good points that I didn't really think about throughout this whole film. But yeah, so you're telling me the smartest guy, one of the smartest guy on the planet, obviously clouded by his obsession with Superman, sort of like Joker. You know, even Joker and Harley Quinn had more of a utilitarian, more the utility purpose through, you know, that dynamic. But it seemingly Lex Luthor has his girlfriend for no reason around, and this was a problem. She just basically was there to destroy his whole plan, and Lex didn't see this at all. Yeah, I didn't really like that at all. Superman's portrayal as Superman, what Superman stands for, what Superman, you know, should be, I think was played pretty well. I think this was a little bit more of a demasculine Superman, not a crazy one, but it was slightly more demasculated. Not as quite as much as My Adventures with Superman, which in some ways that may be a better representation of Superman, because Superman is kind of played more like a pushover in this movie. I really don't like how they have his dynamic with the Justice Gang. None of them really respect him at all. Superman's supposed to be the symbol of hope, the symbol of strength, and they don't respect him at all. It's not like they should fear him. It's that they should aspire to be more like him. And that's not the case in this film. He's just sort of a pushover throughout the whole film by them. Only Mr. Terrific really had this sort of respect for him because, you know, he's sort of intelligent. He's sort of the brains and using more logic. But yeah, the Justice Gang, it just feels like they were trying to put so much into this film, and I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not really a Superman film, which for some people that can be okay, but from what I expected for this movie is to really put, you know, some respect on the hero's name, and I don't think I completely got that in this film. You know, I'm not a big CGI hater. I sort of like the CGI. I don't think the CGI was terrible. It was a lot of CGI, but you know, I think the visuals kind of look crazy once they were in this pocket dimension, but they were fine. I like the lightness of it. You know, Superman's supposed to be sort of this light character in contrast to Batman and the Batman because that movie was the Batman, was what I think when I think about Batman. What I think when I think about Superman is sort of how this film was, you know, how the colors popped and things like that. So that was good. And another thing I really wish they did is, for some reason, I really wish Superman had a country accent. We kind of got teased that in this film because Ma and Pa Kent in this movie had this very country accent. I something I really wish was for Superman to have a country accent. It makes sense. He was sort of a country farm boy. But that I knew there was probably a slim chance for that to be a thing. That would be a change that I would have been okay with in comparison to other changes, but yeah, this Superman was kind of mid. It wasn't bad, and slightly disappointed. I really wish, we had a bit more Superman with Superman and being Clark Kent, him balancing that. What was up with Metamorpho? It seems like Metamorpho was kind of like a joke in the whole movie, and this baby, like, things just kind of happen and it's not really explained much. He just had a change of heart and started helping Superman. And Crypto the dog, I didn't talk about that or really think about that much. This dog is cool. He was a cool dog. He kind of stole the show in some points, and it's good to see Superman has sort of a companion. His caring for life in general. You really see that in this film of him saving people and him not trying to kill this kaiju that him and the Justice Gang are fighting, and the Justice Gang takes it upon themselves to kill this being that Superman didn't want to kill. And I wish he was a bit more passionate on telling them to not kill this thing. And you also see his love for animals because he's saving like a squirrel. I kind of laughed at that in the film, but I understand it's because he does care for that life. But other than that, I mean, Supergirl was shown in this film at the end. It was just a solid film, like a 6 out of 10. It was above average film. It wasn't anything. And the music, I remember the music was kind of ass throughout the whole film. There wasn't really a good score in this film, even with James Gunn and his needle drops that he likes to throw around. It doesn't really work for a Superman movie. It can work for the Guardians of the Galaxy because he liked all the music from Earth. So the scores in this film, the original score that was kind of remixed was probably the only big thing, and then the licensed song at the end of the film that I'm honestly not a big fan of was probably the only 2 songs that I can remember of in this film. So the score was pretty bland, pretty dull, which is something that's a big thing for me in movies. Like, the score has to be A1 too. Everything has to culminate in an experience that's immersive and represents the characters respectively. And I think they dropped the ball there as well. But yeah, I think I said really everything. Overall, I mean, Superman wasn't really a Superman film. It was more like a Justice League film or a Justice Gang film. The politics, people like to say there's a lot of politics in this film, and not at all. You'd have to really be stretching to really, align yourself politically, what's going on in real life to this. I think there was really one stupid line where Superman's like getting like detained, and he's like, "Where you gonna read me my rights?" And I think Rick Flag or something, he's like, "You don't got no rights, boy, you an alien." But Superman's American because he got adopted at birth by Americans. So that's something that they probably don't know because they don't know Clark. But Superman would be sort of an alien, so I guess that sort of makes sense. But other than that, no real politics for real. And Superman kills sort of in this film, which I guess he kills. He throws the Ultraman Bizarro in the black hole that he said earlier in the film when he was in the other dimension that would rip them apart. So this is something I really don't like. The more I thought about this movie, is the more I kind of didn't really like the representation and the standards of Superman in this film. Because Bizarro is one of my favorite Superman villains of all time, because he reminds me of sort of like the special needs people and them needing, help and things. And Superman doesn't help this Ultraman Bizarro character at all. He just lets him get sucked away in this black hole, which, when I think about Superman, I think about the DC animated Superman with Batman the Animated Universe, Justice League Unlimited, and then the Superman animated series. And in that series, I really loved how he treated Bizarro. He was able to compromise with Bizarro and give him his own planet to sort of run around in. I don't think it would have worked in this, but it just shows how much he cares for life and even his oppositions. And in this, he just lets this thing get sucked away. And then there's this corny joke after with Mr. Terrific. So tonally, it was kind of all for me. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. There was actually a couple moments where I laughed. When I laughed when Lex was just showing his craziness when he shoots this guy. It was totally unexpected, which caught me off guard. And I was like, dang, bro, just shot this guy in front of Metamorpho and Superman like that. And the Metamorpho starts crying like a little baby, which was but yeah, I liked the movie, but I expected a lot more. And I don't know if we're going to get a lot more Superman, self-centered Superman movies in this DCU run, which is going to be very disappointing. But hopefully we get, Supergirl is going to come out, and Supergirl is not like Superman at all, which is shown in the film. So I hope they do better with that. I just really didn't like how jam-packed this film was. That was my one worry coming into this film, is that there's going to be too much things that's going to take away from Lois and Superman and Lex and the parents, and him finding, this internal struggle with him being kind so much and him always wanting to do the right thing. So yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to talk about in this film. Maybe one thing about just how, in comparison to Batman takes up the cape because, he wants revenge, he wants people to have justice, and Superman's sort of this character that just wants to do good, which is shown pretty well in this movie. I really like that. This movie just had so much potential, and I think it didn't fully use all of what it needed to use to be able to really make a mark as a Superman film. So that's gonna be really all my thoughts on the Superman film. If you guys watched it, what do you think? Am I crazy? Am I tripping? Did you guys love it? Did you guys hate it? And let me know down in the comment section below.